When God steps in, the narcissist's reign ends. There comes a time when God says, enough. When he steps into your life, the narcissist's control begins to crumble. What once felt like an unbreakable grip of manipulation and deceit starts to loosen. The spiritual chains that held you in confusion, guilt, and fear begin to break. You may not have seen it at first, but God was fighting for you long before you ever realized you needed deliverance. A narcissist thrives on deception, control, and emotional manipulation. They weave a reality in which they are always right, always the victim, and always in charge. Their words are filled with empty promises. Their love is conditional, and their kindness is nothing more than a tool to pull you deeper into their web. But God is not the author of confusion, 1 Corinthians 14:33. He is a God of truth, and when He steps in, He sets the captives free. If you've been entangled in a narcissistic relationship, whether it's a spouse, a parent, a friend, or even a leader, this message is for you. God does not leave His children in bondage. He exposes, He strengthens, He removes, He renews, and ultimately He restores. Here are 5 divine ways God protects you from the narcissist and sets you free. 1. God exposes the narcissist's deception, revealing the change you couldn't see. From the beginning, the narcissist's deception is not obvious. It is insidious, creeping into your mind like a slow-moving fog until, without realizing it, you are no longer certain of what is real. They do not come with outright lies at first. Instead, they distort reality just enough to make you question yourself. You start doubting your own perception, your own feelings, and even your own worth. What was once clear, your values, your convictions, your sense of right and wrong, slowly becomes entangled in their manipulations. They rewrite history, twist your words, and condition you to see them as the victim, the misunderstood, the righteous. They cast themselves as the hero of every story, and you are merely a supporting character in their grand narrative, useful only as long as you conform to their version of reality. But deception cannot survive indefinitely in the presence of truth. And when God steps in, He does not whisper, He exposes. He shines His light into the dark corners of manipulation, revealing not only what the narcissist has done, but also the ways you have unknowingly participated in their illusion. It is painful to realize that you have spent years excusing behavior that was never excusable, justifying actions that were never truly existed. The truth does not just set you free, it shakes you to your core. At first, you resist it, clinging to the explanations that once brought you comfort. You tell yourself, they didn't mean to hurt you, that they love you in their own way, that if you had just been better, stronger, more patient, things would have turned out differently. But deep down you know that is not true, and God, in His mercy, will not allow you to return to the lie once He has revealed the truth. This is where the war begins, because the narcissist senses the shift. They recognize when their grip begins to loosen, and they fight with every tool at their disposal to pull you back into the illusion. They gaslight you harder, trying to convince you that your awakening is nothing more than paranoia. They play the victim, manipulating your empathy, making you feel responsible for their pain. They promise change, offering glimpses of the person you once believed they were, luring you back with false hope. But the difference now is that you see. And once God opens your eyes, nothing they do can ever make you unsee the truth. The words that once controlled you now sound hollow. The guilt that once consumed you no longer has a hold. The spell is breaking, and with it the chains you never even knew were binding you. God's exposure is an act of protection. It is not meant to destroy you, but to save you. Because as long as you believe the narcissist's lies, you remain their prisoner. But the moment God lifts the veil, the power dynamic shifts. Suddenly their tactics no longer work the same way. The words that once made you question yourself now seem desperate, even ridiculous. The fear that kept you compliant begins to fade, and the deeper you lean into the truth, the stronger you become. But truth is not passive, it demands action. It is not enough to know the reality of your situation. You must decide what to do with that knowledge. Will you embrace it, even though it means loss, change, and the terrifying unknown? Or will you cling to the familiarity of deception because it feels safer than stepping into the unknown? This is where many people falter. They see the truth but hesitate to act on it. They remain in toxic cycles because the thought of leaving is more terrifying than the pain of staying. But God does not reveal truth for you to ignore it. He does not expose darkness so that you can choose to remain in it. When He shines His light, He expects you to follow it, and following it means making choices that are difficult, painful, and costly. It means walking away from a person you once loved. It means grieving a relationship that never was what you believed it to be. It means surrendering the illusion and accepting reality for what it is. But in doing so, it means freedom. John 8:32 declares, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And this is how God protects you, by removing the blinders, by stripping away the deception, by making it impossible for you to stay in bondage once you have seen the light. The narcissist's reign does not end because they choose to change. It ends because God will no longer allow them to rule over you, and once the truth is known, nothing can ever enslave you again. 2. God strengthens your inner resilience, breaking the need for their approval. At first, it does not feel like strength. It feels like exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that settles into your soul, making even the smallest decisions feel overwhelming. You have spent so much time walking on eggshells, anticipating their moods, adjusting yourself to avoid conflict, that you no longer know where they end and you begin. Your thoughts are filtered through their perception of you, your worth, measured by their shifting approval. They have conditioned you to seek their validation, to mold yourself into whatever version of you best serves their needs. And for a while, it worked. You learned to ignore your own voice, to silence your own discomfort, to rationalize their cruelty because you believed the alternative. Losing them was too unbearable. But when God begins to strengthen you, He does not do it by making things easier. He does it by making things unbearable. He allows the weight of the situation to become so heavy that you can no longer carry it. The very same words that once kept you bound now repulse you. The apologies that once soothed your pain now feel hollow. The cycle that once felt inescapable now suffocates you, and you reach a breaking point, the moment where the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of change. This is not weakness. This is the beginning of strength. God is stripping away the illusion that you need them. He is revealing that their love was never truly love, but control wrapped in false affection. He is opening your eyes to the reality that the approval you have spent years chasing will never be given freely. It will always be a moving target, an unattainable prize designed to keep you trapped. And so, He begins to fortify you, not with sudden, supernatural confidence, but with a quiet, steady refusal to be controlled any longer. At first, this strength is subtle. You stop explaining yourself to them because you realize they were never listening. You stop justifying your choices because their opinion no longer holds the same weight. You start noticing the patterns, recognizing their tactics in real time, and instead of reacting, you remain silent. And that silence, that is power. Because for the first time, they sense that their grip on you is slipping. They feel it in the way you hesitate before responding, in the way you do not rush to soothe their anger, in the way you no longer play the role they assigned you. And they panic. The moment a narcissist senses they are losing control, they intensify their manipulation. They push every button they once programmed in you. They remind you of every mistake you ever made. They weaponize your empathy, playing the victim, making you feel responsible for their pain. They make grand gestures, false promises, anything to pull you back into their grasp. But this time, it does not work, because something inside of you has shifted. The chains are still there, but they are rusting, cracking, loosening. The power they once had is fading. This is where God's protection becomes clear, because this strength, it is not just willpower, it is divine resilience. It is the Holy Spirit rising up within you, reminding you that you were never meant to live in bondage to someone else's approval. It is God whispering, "You do not belong to them, you belong to me." It is the gradual but unstoppable realization that you are no longer afraid. Isaiah 41:10 declares, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Strength is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it. Strength is not an overnight transformation. It is a series of choices, small but powerful, that lead you away from captivity and toward freedom. And when you finally step into that strength, when you finally stand firm in the identity God has given you, there is nothing they can do to pull you back. Their reign ends, because their power only worked as long as you believed you needed them. If you feel the weight of this battle, if you sense that God is calling you to stand, do not ignore it. Strength is already rising within you. Now is the time to trust Him and step forward. Comment below, "I choose strength. I choose freedom. I choose God's truth." If this message spoke to you, take a deep breath and declare, "I am walking away from fear. I am stepping into my God-given strength." 3. God removes the narcissist from your life, shutting the door no one can reopen. When God begins to move, the separation is not always gentle. It is not a quiet, seamless transition where the narcissist simply fades into the background of your life. No. When God removes a narcissist, it is often a violent tearing away, a forced disconnection that feels like a storm crashing through everything you thought was stable. And at first, it feels like destruction. It feels like loss. It feels like the very foundation beneath your feet is breaking apart. But what if the destruction is actually deliverance? You see, the narcissist was never going to leave on their own. They were never going to wake up one day, look at you and say, "You deserve better. I have taken enough from you." That day was never coming, because a narcissist does not release control willingly. They thrive on attachment. As long as they can manipulate, as long as they can pull you back in with guilt, with obligation, with just enough false hope to keep you tethered, they will never let go. And if you are waiting for them to release you, you will be waiting forever. This is why God steps in. But the way He removes them is not always the way you expect. Sometimes He hardens their heart toward you so that they push you away. They grow colder, more distant, more indifferent than ever before. They stop pretending, stop playing the part, and for the first time you see them as they truly are. Without the mask, without the charm, without the empty words that once kept you believing. And it wounds you deeply because you realize they were never the person you imagined them to be. Other times God orchestrates circumstances that force you apart. Doors slam shut, opportunities dry up. The connection that once seemed unbreakable suddenly crumbles under the weight of its own dysfunction. At first you resist it, you try to fix it, you fight to hold on, you pray for restoration, believing that if you just try harder, if you just love them enough, if you just endure a little longer, things will change. But what if God is not answering your prayers to restore the relationship because He was the one who ended it? What if every unanswered prayer is actually His protection? Sometimes we don't realize we are clinging to poison until God forcefully removes it from our hands. We don't understand that what feels like a devastating loss is actually divine rescue. But make no mistake, God does not tear something apart without purpose. He is not a God of random destruction. He is a God of intentional deliverance. When he removes someone from your life, it is because he sees something you do not. He sees what they are saying behind your back. He sees the traps they are setting, the future pain they will cause, the destruction that will come if you stay connected. He sees what you cannot, and in his mercy, he intervenes before the damage becomes irreversible. And yet, even after the separation, even after God has made it clear that this chapter is over, the greatest struggle often remains within you, because even though they are gone, the longing for closure lingers. The mind replays every memory, trying to make sense of the senseless, trying to grasp at some understanding that will bring peace. And in this space of confusion, the enemy whispers, "Go back." Maybe you misunderstood them. Maybe they didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe this time will be different. This is the final test, because separation is not just about leaving the narcissist. It is about making the choice to never return. It is about recognizing that when God closes a door, it is closed for a reason. And if you force it back open, you will walk back into the very same cycle of deception, manipulation, and heartbreak that God just delivered you from. Lot's wife made that mistake. She was given a divine escape from destruction, but she looked back. She longed for what God was trying to pull her from, and in that single moment of hesitation, she lost everything. This is the weight of disobedience. When God removes something, when he closes a door, when he ends a relationship, the greatest act of faith is trusting that he knows what he's doing. Revelation 3:7 declares, "What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open." If God has removed the narcissist from your life, trust him. It is not punishment. It is protection. It is not rejection. It is redirection. You are not losing something. You are being saved from something. And once you accept that, once you stop resisting the separation, once you surrender to the divine work God is doing, you will see the truth. The narcissist reign has ended, not because they changed, but because God said, "No more." God begins the process of mental and spiritual renewal, reclaiming the mind they tried to control. Even after the narcissist is gone, they are not truly gone. Their absence does not immediately undo the damage they inflicted. Their voice still lingers in your mind, whispering accusations and planting doubts long after they have left. It happens in subtle ways: a hesitation before making a decision, a reflexive guilt when setting a boundary, a sudden fear of rejection that washes over you for no apparent reason. Though they are no longer present, their influence remains, like fingerprints smudged over every part of your life. You are free in the physical sense, but inside, you are still fighting a battle they left behind. This is why God's work is not complete when he removes the narcissist from your life. It is not enough to be separated from them physically. You must also be separated from them mentally and spiritually, because as long as their words dictate your thoughts, as long as their criticism shapes how you see yourself, as long as their conditioning determines how you respond to life, then they still have power over you. And true freedom is not just about escaping their presence. It is about breaking their hold over your identity. But breaking that hold is not easy. The wounds they inflicted were not just external, they were internal. Narcissists do not simply control with their actions. They control through your own mind. They make you question your emotions, doubt your instincts, and second-guess your reality. They teach you to mistrust yourself. Every time you tried to stand up for yourself, they made you feel unreasonable. Every time you expressed pain, they made you feel dramatic. Every time you sensed something was wrong, they convinced you that you were imagining things. And slowly, they rewired your thinking to depend on them. But God is not just a God of deliverance. He is a God of renewal. He does not simply take you out of Egypt. He takes Egypt out of you. He does not just remove the chains. He teaches you how to walk without them. Because it is possible to be physically free, yet still live like a captive. And that is not the freedom God has for you. Romans 12:02 declares, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." This is not just a suggestion, it is a necessity. Because if your mind remains shaped by the narcissist's influence, then even though they are gone, the damage continues. And this is where God begins his most important work, the work of restoring your mind. At first, this renewal feels unnatural. The patterns they ingrained in you are so deeply embedded that you do not even realize they are there. You hesitate to trust yourself, unsure if your thoughts are truly your own or echoes of their manipulation. You feel guilt when you choose yourself because you have been conditioned to believe that prioritizing your well-being is selfish. You wonder if you are overreacting, if you were the problem all along, because they convince you that every issue stemmed from you. But this is where God interrupts the cycle. He begins by revealing the lies. Slowly, he brings clarity where confusion once ruled. He allows you to see the ways you were controlled, the subtle tactics they used, the truth behind their manipulation. And at first it is overwhelming, because recognizing the depth of deception means confronting the fact that much of what you believed about yourself was never true. They told you that you were too emotional, but God says, "I created you with a heart that feels deeply, and that is a gift." They told you that you were not good enough, but God says, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made." Psalm 139:14. They told you that you would never be loved without them, but God says, "I have loved you with an everlasting love." Jeremiah 31:3. Little by little, God dismantles every false belief they planted in your mind. He strips away their voice and replaces it with his. Where there was fear, he breathes courage. Where there was doubt, he speaks certainty. Where there was self-hatred, he floods in with love. And with every truth you embrace, their grip over you weakens. But renewal is not just about unlearning. It is about rebuilding. Because if you are not careful, you will define yourself by your wounds. You will see yourself only as a survivor of their abuse, constantly looking back, reliving the past, carrying the weight of what they did to you as if it is the most important thing about you. But God does not want you to merely survive. He wants you to thrive. He calls you into a new identity, one that is not shaped by trauma, but by his truth. He does not want you to walk in bitterness, constantly proving to yourself and others that you have overcome. He wants you to walk in peace, so fully healed that the past no longer defines you. And that peace does not come from pretending it never happened. It comes from knowing that what happened no longer has power over you. The greatest evidence of renewal is not that you never think about them again. It is that when you do, their memory no longer holds weight. Their words no longer echo with the same authority. Their presence no longer stirs fear or longing, because they no longer own a piece of you. Isaiah 26:3 promises, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you." This is the final phase of God's renewal, the restoration of your mind to a place of unshakable peace, a place where you no longer live in reaction to what they did, but in response to what God is doing, a place where their past control is nothing compared to his present power. One day, without even realizing when it happened, you will wake up and feel different, lighter, stronger, as if a weight you carried for years has finally lifted. You will hear a familiar thought, one they planted long ago, and instead of believing it, you will reject it without hesitation. You will recognize the manipulation in someone else and know that you will never fall for it again. You will see yourself through God's eyes, not theirs. And that is when you will know the renewal is complete. You are no longer just free in body, you are free in mind. And that is a freedom they can never take from you again. 5. God restores you and aligns you with your purpose, rising from the ashes of what they tried to destroy. There is a point in every healing journey where you begin to realize that survival is not the end goal. Restoration is. God does not simply pull you out of the fire, He refines you in it. He does not just deliver you from bondage, He leads you into a promised land. Because if all you do is escape, but remain defined by the wounds they inflicted, then you are still living under the shadow of what they did. God's plan was never just to save you from the narcissist. It was to heal you into the person you were always meant to be. At first, restoration seems impossible. You look at what's left of yourself, and it doesn't feel like enough. You feel hollow, depleted, as if they took so much from you that there is nothing substantial left to rebuild. You grieve, not just for the relationship, but for the years lost, the dreams shattered, the version of yourself that you barely recognize anymore. It feels like everything has been stolen, and the enemy whispers that you will never be whole again, that you will always carry this pain, that your best days were left behind in the ruins of that relationship. But God does not leave you in that place, because what you see as loss, He sees as preparation. When He restores, He does not take you back to who you were before the abuse. No, He creates something new, stronger, and unshakable. Because the person you were before, the one who tolerated their lies, the one who sought their approval, the one who ignored the red flags out of love and hope, that person no longer exists. You are not going back. You are being made new. Think of Job. He lost everything. His wealth, his health, his family. He sat in the ashes of his former life, questioning, mourning, wondering if he would ever recover. But when God restored him, He did not just give him back what was taken. He gave him more. His latter days were greater than his former days. And this is what divine restoration looks like. It does not return you to what was. It lifts you into something greater than you could have ever imagined. But here is the part that most people miss. Restoration requires your participation. You have to stop looking back. You have to stop trying to salvage the pieces of what God has already declared finished. You cannot heal while still hoping for closure. You cannot step into your future while clinging to the idea that one day the narcissist will understand, apologize, or make things right. Because they won't. And that's not your battle to fight. God is calling you forward, into healing, into purpose, into a life where you are no longer defined by what they did to you, but by who He is within you. Because now you see the red flags you once ignored. Now you recognize manipulation for what it is. Now you understand your worth in a way you never did before. And that wisdom, that clarity, that resilience, that is the evidence of restoration. Isaiah 61:3 says that He will give you beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. This is God's promise, not just to heal you, but to use everything you endured as the foundation for something far greater. One day you will look back, not with regret, but with gratitude, because you will see that the enemy's plan to break you only revealed the depth of your resilience, that what they meant for harm, God used for good, that everything you lost was making room for something greater. And when that day comes, you will finally understand that Narcissist did not win. They never had power over your destiny, because God's plan for your life was never in their hands. And when that day comes, you will finally understand the Narcissist did not win. They never had power over your destiny, because God's plan for your life was never in their hands. What they tried to break, God rebuilt stronger. What they tried to steal, God restored greater. And what they meant for harm, God turned into a testimony of His faithfulness. Every tear you shed, every moment of doubt, every wound they inflicted, none of it was wasted. God took it all, reshaped it, and used it as the very foundation for your strength, your wisdom, and your unshakable faith. The pain that once consumed you has now become the very tool God used to refine you, shaping you into someone who no longer seeks validation from broken people, no longer tolerates manipulation. In today's fast-paced, hyper-connected world, many of us encounter individuals who drain our energy and disrupt our peace, what we commonly refer to as toxic people. Toxicity comes in many forms, whether it's a manipulative co-worker, a hypercritical family member, or even an online bully. These relationships can leave us feeling frustrated, powerless, and emotionally drained. As Christians, we strive to live in love and peace with others, but that doesn't mean we have to endure every hurtful relationship. Jesus himself dealt with difficult people and gave us a blueprint for handling such challenges with wisdom and grace. In this sermon, we'll explore 13 Christian ways to deal with toxic people, equipping you to protect your emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being while staying true to your faith. Through these strategies, rooted in biblical wisdom and relatable to our modern-day struggles, you will learn how to handle toxic relationships with compassion, strength, and resilience. Number 1. Recognize toxic behavior. The first step in dealing with toxic people is recognizing the signs of toxic behavior. Toxicity can manifest in various ways, including constant criticism, manipulation, negativity, and selfishness. These behaviors can sneak up on us, especially when they come from someone we care about. But if left unchecked, they can poison our emotional and spiritual health. C.S. Lewis, in the Screwtape Letters, illustrates how toxic influences, like the tempter's subtle manipulation, can pull us away from the truth of God. The safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, he writes. In today's world, we see examples of toxic behavior everywhere, from social media influencers spreading negativity to colleagues who engage in office gossip. Toxic people thrive on chaos and division, often using their words and actions to belittle others or create tension. Proverbs 22 verses 24 to 25 warns us, "Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered." Identifying toxic behavior is critical because, as Christians, we need to be vigilant about what we allow into our hearts and minds. Toxicity is not just an inconvenience, it's a threat to our well-being. Be mindful of those who drain you emotionally or cause you to stumble in your walk with Christ. Number 2, guard your heart. The Bible makes it clear that we must guard our hearts. Proverbs 4:23 reminds us, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." This isn't just about protecting ourselves from negative influences. It's about preserving our emotional, mental, and spiritual health. In the Four Loves, C.S. Lewis writes, "To love at all is to be vulnerable." Yet he also warns that guarding our hearts does not mean closing ourselves off from love and life. Guarding your heart, especially in this digital age, may mean limiting your time on social media, unfollowing accounts that stir up anger or jealousy, or muting toxic conversations. At work, it may look like being selective about who you open up to, or limiting your interaction with colleagues who thrive on office politics. In friendships and family relationships, guarding your heart means understanding your emotional limits. It's not unloving to protect yourself. In fact, it allows you to show up more fully in the relationships that matter. Number 3, set healthy boundaries. Jesus modeled setting boundaries throughout his ministry. In John 2:24, we read that Jesus did not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. He knew when to engage and when to step back. Boundaries are an act of self-care, They are necessary to preserve your emotional and spiritual well-being. C.S. Lewis emphasizes this in Mere Christianity, where he discusses the necessity of love being combined with truth. True love often involves setting boundaries, as it is not merely a feeling but a commitment to the good of the other, even when that good means limiting interaction. In modern life, setting boundaries might mean creating distance from a toxic friend who constantly drains your energy, or telling a manipulative coworker that you won't participate in gossip. In relationships where walking away isn't an option, such as with family or a spouse, setting boundaries may look like limiting the topics you discuss. Healthy boundaries aren't about punishing others. They are about protecting yourself and maintaining peace. In Matthew 18, verses 15 to 17, Jesus provides a model for addressing conflict, emphasizing clear communication, and, if necessary, creating distance from someone who continues to hurt or harm. It's a reminder that setting limits is not unloving. It's essential for maintaining your well-being. Number 4, practice patience but don't endure abuse. In Ephesians 4:2, Paul encourages us to be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. As Christians, patience is a virtue we are called to embody. However, patience does not mean enduring abuse or consistently tolerating harmful behavior. C.S. Lewis, in The Problem of Pain, explains that God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience. This quote serves as a reminder that pain and suffering are not to be endured without discernment. Sometimes that shout in our pain is the signal to step away from a relationship that is damaging our well-being. In real-life scenarios, this might mean stepping away from a verbally abusive partner, distancing yourself from a toxic friend, or reporting workplace harassment. It's crucial to differentiate between the everyday challenges that call for patience and situations that are genuinely harmful. Protecting yourself from abuse is not only wise, it's biblical. Number 5, don't take the bait. Toxic people often try to provoke a reaction, whether it's through criticism, gossip, or manipulation. They thrive on creating drama and discord. The Bible provides us with practical wisdom on how to handle this. James 1:19 instructs us, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. In the Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis demonstrates how toxic influences, often instigated by unseen forces, bait us into harmful responses. He writes, the game is to have them all running about with fire extinguishers whenever there is a flood. This analogy reminds us not to react impulsively. In today's world, it's easy to get drawn into toxic arguments, whether it's an argument with a coworker, a family feud, or a heated social media debate. But as believers, we're called to a higher standard. We don't need to take the bait. When someone is trying to stir up conflict, pause. Instead of reacting emotionally, respond with grace, or in some cases, don't respond at all. Jesus himself modeled this when confronted by the Pharisees. Instead of getting caught in their traps, he often responded with wisdom or silence, refusing to let them provoke him. In your interactions, whether at work, at home, or online, strive to respond with the same wisdom. Number 6, respond with grace and truth. One of the hardest things about dealing with toxic people is the temptation to either retaliate or withdraw completely. But Jesus teaches us to respond with both grace and truth. John 1:14 tells us that Jesus came full of grace and truth. This means that while we are called to be loving, we are also called to stand firm in truth. C.S. Lewis touches on this balance in Mere Christianity. He states, truth and love must be combined, for both are needed to walk in the light. Responding to toxic people with grace doesn't mean excusing bad behavior, but it does mean handling conflict with the love and strength of Christ. In a practical sense, this means responding calmly but firmly. If someone is manipulative, speak the truth with love. If someone is constantly critical, let them know how their words affect you. Grace doesn't mean being a doormat, and truth doesn't mean being harsh. By balancing both, we can handle toxic people in a Christ-like manner. Number 7, limit your exposure. There are some people in our lives whom we can't completely avoid. Perhaps they're family members, co-workers, or even neighbors. While we are called to love others, we're also called to use wisdom in our relationships. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." C.S. Lewis reflects on the importance of choosing our companions wisely in the 4 Loves, where he writes, "Affection is responsible for 9/10 of whatever solid and durable happiness there is in our lives. Yet not every relationship brings such happiness." Limiting exposure to toxic people ensures that we nurture our relationships with those who lift us up, rather than drain our spirit. In today's world, this principle can be applied to toxic relationships in various ways. If you have a toxic coworker, you might limit your interaction with them to strictly professional matters. If you have a friend who constantly gossips or brings you down, reduce time together. Limiting exposure isn't about cutting people off entirely. It's about managing the time and energy you give to relationships that don't nourish your spirit. By doing so, you protect yourself from being weighed down by negativity while still showing love in appropriate ways. Number 8, surround yourself with encouragers. While we can't always control who we interact with, we can choose to surround ourselves with people who uplift us. Ecclesiastes 4 verses 9 to 10 reminds us, "Two are better than one. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up." C.S. Lewis understood the value of friendship and community, emphasizing it in the 4 Loves, when he wrote, "Friendship is the least instinctive, organic, biological, gregarious and necessary of our loves. But without it, we reach none of the other things." Surrounding yourself with people who build you up is essential. In today's world, where negativity and toxicity seem to be everywhere, it's essential to cultivate relationships with people who encourage, inspire, and build us up. Whether it's a small group at church, a prayer partner, or a trusted friend, having a support system is crucial for navigating difficult relationships. These are the people who will pray for you, speak truth into your life. Number 9, pray for them. It's natural to want to avoid or even retaliate against people who hurt us, but Jesus calls us to a higher standard. In Matthew 5:44, Jesus commands, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." In Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis wrote about the transformative power of prayer. "I pray because I can't help myself. I pray because I'm helpless." Praying for toxic people can be one of the most powerful things you do, not just for them, but for yourself. When we pray for those who hurt us, we are aligning our hearts with God's love and grace. It shifts our perspective from resentment to compassion. Toxic people are often deeply wounded themselves, and prayer can soften our hearts toward them. When you pray for someone who has wronged you, ask God to work in their hearts, but also ask for wisdom and strength in dealing with them. It doesn't mean excusing their behavior, but it does mean releasing the burden of anger and allowing God to take control of the situation. Number 10, forgive but don't forget boundaries. Forgiveness is a cornerstone of the Christian faith. Ephesians 4:32 instructs us, Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the need for boundaries. C.S. Lewis, in The Weight of Glory, states, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." But forgiveness does not mean tolerating toxic behavior. It is about freeing ourselves from resentment while still protecting ourselves from harm. Sometimes, after being hurt by someone toxic, we feel the pressure to forgive and forget. While we are called to forgive, it's important to remember that boundaries are still necessary. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the weight of anger. It's not about letting toxic behavior continue unchecked. In real life, this might mean forgiving a friend who has gossiped about you, but still deciding to limit how much personal information you share with them moving forward. Or it could mean forgiving a family member who has been verbally abusive, but choosing to maintain distance. Forgiveness is about releasing the hurt. Boundaries are about protecting yourself from future harm. Number 11, release the need for approval. Many toxic people thrive on controlling others through manipulation, guilt, or the need for approval. But as Christians, our identity and worth are found in Christ, not in what others think of us. Galatians 1:10 says, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God?" C.S. Lewis emphasizes this truth in The Problem of Pain, where he points out that human approval is fleeting, but our relationship with God is eternal. When dealing with toxic people, it's essential to release the need for their approval. Your worth isn't defined by whether or not they like you or agree with your decisions. When you release the need for their approval, you also release the power they have over you. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent or callous, but rather placing your trust in God's approval instead of human opinions. Number 12, know when to walk away. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, a relationship remains toxic. In such cases, it's okay to walk away. Matthew 10:14 provides wisdom when Jesus instructed his disciples, "If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet." C.S. Lewis, in The Great Divorce, writes about the dangers of clinging to relationships or situations that ultimately lead us away from God. There are only two kinds of people: those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says, "In the end, thy will be done." Walking away from toxic relationships may be necessary to ensure that God's will is truly what guides your life. In today's world, walking away from a toxic relationship might mean ending a friendship that has become emotionally harmful, leaving a job where manipulation and negativity are rampant, or stepping back from a relationship that is abusive. Walking away is not a sign of weakness, it's an act of wisdom and self-preservation. If someone continually disrespects your boundaries, ignores your needs, or brings consistent harm into your life, it's not unchristian to step away. In fact, by doing so, you are honoring the person God created you to be, a child of God deserving of love and respect. Number 13, trust in God's justice. Finally, when dealing with toxic people, we must remember that justice ultimately belongs to God. Romans 12:19 reminds us, "Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay,' says the Lord." In Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis reminds us of the importance of trusting God's justice, rather than seeking revenge or becoming consumed with bitterness. "I must keep alive in myself the desire for my true country, which I shall not find till after death," he writes. Trusting in God's ultimate justice allows us to let go of bitterness and resentment, knowing that He will handle things according to His will. In modern life, we often want to see justice immediately, whether it's getting back at someone who hurt us or seeking to expose a toxic individual. But the Bible calls us to a different path. Our job is to live in love, forgive, and set boundaries, trusting that God will bring justice in His time. This doesn't mean we allow people to walk all over us, but it does mean that we don't seek to take matters into our own hands. God sees everything, and His justice is perfect. Trusting Him allows us to let go of bitterness and resentment, knowing that He will handle things according to His will. Dealing with toxic people is one of life's greatest challenges, but as Christians, we are not left without guidance. The Bible equips us with wisdom, love, and discernment for navigating these difficult relationships. Through recognizing toxic behavior, setting healthy boundaries, praying for those who hurt us, and trusting in God's justice, we can protect our hearts while still showing Christ's love. Remember, God walks with you every step of the way. You are not called to face these challenges alone. Whether it's a difficult co-worker, a draining friend, or a hurtful family member, God's grace will empower you. You are a child of God, and your peace and well-being matter. Walk in love, but guard your heart with all diligence, trusting that God will take care of the rest. Friends, understand this. In the spirit realm, nothing is random. Every single event carries either a blessing or a curse. Right now, countless people are under spiritual attack because they are missing the critical warning signs God sends. Today, I have an urgent warning for you about specific smells that aren't just unpleasant. They are spiritual alarms. You need to know how the dark spiritual world operates. Those deep in witchcraft are relentless strategists. They dissect the spirit realm like ruthless scientists, constantly seeking weak points, vulnerable entryways into your life and your family's safety. What you simply detect in the unseen realm is never just a coincidence. It's a clear signal of what dark forces are attempting to gain access to your home and loved ones. Think about it. In the spirit world, you are either fully shielded by God's covering or dangerously exposed to demonic influence. That weird smell? You might dismiss it, but spiritually, it could be a direct attack targeting your position, your peace, everything. Remember Ephesians 6:11. Put on the whole armor of God. When there are cracks, gaps in your spiritual defenses, the enemy will slip through, leaving behind signs you can detect. That's precisely why God gave us explicit warnings in Scripture, not just as information, but as vital protection for survival. God is intensely intentional about spiritual signals, and believe me, so is the devil. Now prepare for an uncomfortable truth most churches are afraid to speak. Smell number 1, sulfur. The smell of sulfur, the stench of the pits of hell, is probably the most well-known smell when it comes to demonic activity. Sulfur is a main ingredient in many of the rituals used to curse believers with spiritual bondage. If you've never smelled sulfur, it reeks like rotten eggs or the sharp scent of matches. When this smell appears in your house from nowhere, watch out. This is a clear sign that someone is hexing you. Don't say it's just your imagination. That's what the enemy wants you to think. He wants you to normalize spiritual warfare signals. He wants you to glamorize your spiritual blindness. He wants you to think it's just a smell. But some of you are smelling the very odor of your captivity. You've been targeted by hell without knowing it. Today I'm calling you out of ignorance into God's marvelous discernment. What you smell becomes a doorway. When sulfur appears, the spirit of fear, confusion, and torment enters. Witches pray over substances before using them against believers. They chant incantations and assign spirits because they understand what many believers don't. Smells carry spiritual frequencies. Some of you need to cleanse your home, not for comfort, but because of infiltrating spirits. Smell number 2, rotting or decay. When you notice the putrid smell of rotting garbage, decaying meat, or something sour and fetid with no sauce, watch out. This isn't just unpleasant, It's a spiritual alarm. In the spirit realm, decay and putrid smells are connected with death. These definitely suggest the presence of death spirits sent to disrupt your life. They become attached to you and mess with your mind, not necessarily your body. The smell of rot and decay symbolizes that someone is spiritually burying you. You may have heard ministers suggest burying items in cemeteries to represent an enemy's demise. Well, perhaps someone is doing the same to you, and this smell is God's warning system alerting you. This is a sign demanding your immediate attention. Decay attracts more death spirits into your home. Wonder why you feel heavy depression, oppressive thoughts, or mental confusion? Could it be you're ignoring the spiritual signs of attack? Don't say it's just your nose playing tricks. That's exactly what the enemy wants you to believe while he plants spiritual death in your household. The stench of decay is a spiritual GPS beacon saying, this house is open for demonic habitation. Smell number 3, burnt hair or fabric. The third smell is burnt hair or burnt fabric when there's absolutely no source of fire in sight. This smell is usually linked to effigies and puppet magic. Your enemy has created a doll in your likeness and is burning it to destroy you. This is warfare at its most direct. Someone is intentionally targeting your very essence through ceremonial burning. When you smell burning with no explanation, it's a clear signal that someone is trying to burn away your divine purpose, your spiritual protection, your very identity. This isn't coincidence. It's coordinated spiritual attack. The enemy wants to incinerate your confidence, your faith, your spiritual covering. While you're wondering about the smell, forces of darkness are actively working to reduce your spiritual authority to ashes. Smell. Number 4. Candles. When none are burning. The fourth warning sign is the smell of candles when you're not burning any. This isn't your imagination. It's a spiritual invasion. When your home suddenly smells like candles with no visible source, someone is working powerful candle magic against you. In the spirit realm, this phantom smell indicates ritual activity targeting your household specifically. This mysterious candle scent reveals that someone has lit candles with your name, your image, or items from your home, binding you to their will through powerful rituals. While you're oblivious, thinking it's just a pleasant fragrance, your spiritual authority is being systematically dismantled through ceremonial power. Satan doesn't announce his strategies. He disguises them as harmless sensations while conducting spiritual sabotage. Hell doesn't respect your church attendance. Hell respects your spiritual discernment. You can be called pastor, prophet, or evangelist, but if you ignore these warning signs, you're no threat to the enemy. The sons of Sceva tried casting out devils without proper authority, and demons responded, Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are you? They weren't clothed in true spiritual perception. These smells matter. Smell. Number 5. Feces. The fifth smell, as disgusting as it is to discuss, is the stench of feces, especially dog or cat excrement when you don't have pets. Someone has literally put you in a bottle with feces, and this isn't symbolic. It's real spiritual warfare. This vile practice is done for one purpose, to turn your life into complete garbage. This will slow you down, bring terrible luck, and usher calamity into every area of your existence. This isn't just an unpleasant odor. It's a spiritual signature that someone has cursed your progress, your favor, your very destiny. While you're spraying air freshener thinking it's a plumbing issue, you're actually under targeted attack meant to reduce your life to waste. The enemy is laughing while you ignore the spiritual warning signs God is allowing you to detect through your physical senses. You'll notice your life suddenly feels stagnant. Opportunities disappear, relationships sour, prayers seem blocked, all tracing back to something you thought didn't matter. A disgusting smell that actually carried demonic assignment. As blood on doorposts marked Israelites for protection, these foul odors mark people for spiritual infiltration and systematic destruction. Smell number 6. Urine or ammonia. The sixth smell that signals intense spiritual warfare is a sharp ammonia or urine odor, with no explanation. This isn't a cleaning product or pet accident. It's direct evidence of domination spells targeting you. When this acidic smell appears in your home from nowhere, someone has performed rituals specifically designed to control you, your decisions, your will, and your spiritual authority. This smell is directly linked with dark rituals of dominion and control. Practitioners mark territory spiritually, the same way animals urinate to claim domain. Someone wants to spiritually own you, manipulate your choices, and override your God-given free will. While you're wondering about the strange smell, invisible chains of spiritual bondage are being wrapped around your mind and spirit. Have you noticed sudden difficulty making decisions? Finding yourself strangely compliant with toxic people? Feeling an invisible weight pressing down on your thoughts? You're experiencing the manifestations of domination spells. The enemy doesn't need your permission if you ignore his warning signs. Your spiritual territory has been marked without your consent, and now someone is claiming ownership. Smell number 7, vinegar. The 7th smell is the sharp scent of vinegar when you haven't been using any. This isn't random. It's evidence of sour jars created against you. These aren't ordinary jars. They're specifically crafted containers filled with vinegar and your personal items, designed with the sole purpose of turning your entire life upside down. And they work powerfully. This is direct spiritual sabotage. When you detect unexplained vinegar scents, someone has placed your name, your photo, or items from your home into a jar of vinegar, speaking curses that everything in your life will sour and turn bitter. Your relationships, finances, health, and peace are all targeted through this specific ritual. The effects are devastating. Systematic destruction of everything you've built. Have you noticed your life suddenly seems completely inverted? Good things turn bad. Sweet experiences turn sour. Friendly people become hostile. Financial increase becomes loss. This isn't bad luck or coincidence. It's the manifestation of sour jar curses operating against your divine destiny. The enemy has strategically positioned spiritual acid to corrode your blessings. Smell number 8, moldy or damp. The 8th smell is moldy dampness with no visible moisture source. This isn't random household odor. It's a buildup of negative energy festering around you, growing like spiritual cancer. When this moldy smell appears, someone has strategically planted spiritual decay in your environment, and it's actively multiplying, consuming your blessings, and spreading throughout your spiritual atmosphere. This smell indicates dark energy accumulating in corners of your home, in shadows of your relationships, in hidden areas of your finances. Like black mold that spreads unseen behind walls, spiritual mold grows where you're not looking, creating toxic atmosphere that sickens your spiritual immune system. The stench is your divine warning system activating before complete collapse. Have you felt increasingly heavy? Finding it harder to pray? Noticing your spiritual sensitivity diminishing? These aren't spiritual growing pains. They're symptoms of mold-like corruption eating away at your spiritual foundation. While you're trying air fresheners, the enemy is establishing colonies of demonic influence throughout your spiritual house. This must be addressed immediately. Smoke your entire home aggressively. Use white sage, cedar, or go directly to camphor for maximum effect. Mix salt with charcoal, placing it in small bowls throughout your house to absorb negative energy. For powerful protection, grind sunflower seeds and sprinkle them throughout your property. They represent light overcoming darkness. Visualize sun rays, creating an impenetrable barrier of light around your home. For reversal, write your enemy's name, or enemy of mine, on paper with a specific command. I return all this moldy, stagnant energy to you because it does not belong to me. All this corruption is sent back to its source by the power of Christ's blood. Burn this paper with rosemary, thyme, and basil on a charcoal disc. When consumed, throw the ashes far from your home, preferably in running water flowing away from you. This breaks the spiritual connection permanently. Smell number 10, perfumes and body odors. The 10th smell is unexplained perfumes or body odors appearing in your home. This isn't your imagination. It's spiritual evidence of love binding. Someone wants to bind themselves to you through powerful rituals. When you detect mysterious fragrances that aren't your products, someone has performed ceremonial binding to create unhealthy soul ties with you without your knowledge or consent. This perfume smell symbolizes one thing. Someone is attempting to create spiritual and emotional chains connecting you to them. They want to control your affections, manipulate your emotions, and direct your life choices through spiritual entanglement. While you're wondering about the strange fragrance, invisible cords are being wrapped around your soul, tethering you to toxic connections. Have you noticed sudden obsessive thoughts about someone? Finding yourself inexplicably drawn to a person who's wrong for you? Feeling emotions that don't align with your values? Experiencing unusual dreams about someone? These aren't random feelings. They're symptoms of love-binding magic. The mysterious fragrance is evidence of ritual activity targeting your very heart and will. Listen carefully. In the spirit realm, nothing happens by accident. These smells aren't random occurrences. They're divine warning systems alerting you to targeted spiritual warfare. The enemy wants you thinking it's just your imagination, just coincidence, just strange household odors. That's exactly how he keeps you blind while conducting spiritual sabotage against your destiny. Wonder why you attract toxic people? Face relentless spiritual opposition? Experience strange dreams? Struggle financially despite your best efforts? Have confusion in your home? Could it be you've been ignoring the spiritual warning signs God graciously allows you to detect through your physical senses? The enemy wants you normalizing spiritual warfare signals. He wants you glamorizing your spiritual blindness. Rather than waiting until you're under full attack, establish regular spiritual cleansing as preventative warfare. Perform weekly spiritual baths, maintain active prayer altars, communicate with your spiritual guides and ancestors, and create consistent protection rituals. Always strive to remain spiritually protected. The wisest believers aren't just reactive, they're proactively fortified against every demonic strategy. Stay very smart, very alert, and very aware of the warning signs God provides. When you recognize these smells, act immediately with spiritual protocols that neutralize attacks and send them back to their source. Stay protected, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay extremely powerful in spiritual warfare. You wake up hungry, you eat, you feel satisfied, you go about your day. But what if I told you that some of the most popular foods in the world right now, the ones everyone is eating, the ones trending on social media, are carrying spiritual poison? What if the very thing you're putting in your mouth to sustain your body is simultaneously destroying your spirit? You think you're just having lunch, but in the invisible dimension, a transaction is taking place. A contract is being signed. A door is being opened. You were born with a divine assignment. Before your mother knew your name, God had already written your purpose in the books of heaven. You were sent to earth because something that God wanted accomplished could not be done until you arrived. Your life is the answer to a prayer. Your presence on earth is heaven's solution to a problem. But here's the dangerous truth. Just because God has a plan doesn't mean you will complete it. You can miss it. You can delay it. You can eat your way out of it. That's right. You can literally consume your way out of your calling. Because food has never been just physical. From the very beginning, food has been spiritual. Think about it. What was the first thing that caused humanity to fall? Food, the forbidden fruit. What did Esau trade his birthright for? Food, a bowl of stew. What did the Israelites complain about in the wilderness? Food. They wanted the food of Egypt more than they wanted the promise of God. Food is covenant. When you eat, you're doing more than filling your stomach. You're participating in a spiritual transaction. You're making an agreement. You're establishing a connection. The Bible warns us about eating food sacrificed to idols because God understands something we've forgotten. What you consume, consumes you. What you feed on, feeds on you. And right now, in this generation, the enemy has learned to hide his altars in places you would never suspect. There are corporations right now, massive global companies, that are operating as spiritual portals. Their products aren't just food, they're offerings. And every time you consume them, you're participating in something you don't see, but something that sees you. Number 1. Bubble tea or boba. The first trending food is bubble tea, also known as boba. This drink has taken the world by storm. You see boba shops on every corner now. Young people line up for hours just to get their hands on these colorful drinks filled with chewy tapioca pearls. Social media is flooded with videos of people sipping these drinks, showing off the different flavors and toppings. But let me tell you what's really happening in the spirit when you consume this. Bubble tea originated in Taiwan in the 1980s, but its roots go much deeper into Asian spiritual practices. The tapioca pearls themselves, these black spheres sitting at the bottom of your cup, represent something significant in Eastern mysticism. In many Asian cultures, black pearls and spheres are symbols used in divination and fortune-telling. They represent the unknown, the hidden, the mystical realm. When you drink bubble tea, you're not just consuming a beverage. You're participating in a practice that has spiritual symbolism attached to it. The act of sucking these dark spheres through a straw has become almost ritualistic. Watch people drink boba. There's an obsession with it, an addiction to it. That's not just about taste, that's a spiritual hook. Furthermore, many bubble tea shops are decorated with Asian spiritual imagery, cartoons of animals that represent zodiac signs, lucky cats with waving paws, Chinese characters that invoke blessings from Buddhist or Taoist traditions. You think you're just sitting in a cute cafe, but you're surrounded by altars and symbols that invite spirits. The brewing process itself, in traditional shops, often involves practices passed down through generations. Practices that include speaking words over the tea, specific methods of preparation that have spiritual significance. Some shop owners even have small shrines in their preparation areas, asking for success and favor from spirits and ancestors. Your drink passes through that atmosphere before it reaches your hands. And let's talk about the addiction factor. Bubble tea is designed to create dependency. The sugar content is astronomical. The chewy texture of the pearls triggers something in your brain that makes you crave more. This is a form of bondage. When you find yourself unable to go a day without bubble tea, when you're spending excessive money on these drinks, when you plan your schedule around getting boba, you're not just enjoying a beverage anymore. You're serving it. The Bible warns us not to be mastered by anything. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 12 says, "All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything." When bubble tea controls your cravings, your spending, your daily routine, it has become an idol. It has become something you serve instead of God. Look at the names of these drinks. Many of them have names connected to Eastern spirituality, mythology, or luck. Tiger sugar, dragon fruit, lucky charm milk tea. These aren't just creative marketing names. They're invoking spiritual forces. When you order a drink named after a mythological creature or a concept from Eastern religion, you're speaking those things over yourself. The culture around bubble tea has also created a spirit of vanity and social competition. People don't just drink it. They photograph it. They post it. They use it to show status and belonging. The cup becomes a social currency. This is the same spirit that operates through all worldly trends, the spirit that says you need this thing to be accepted, to be seen, to matter. That's not the spirit of Christ. That's the spirit of this world. The second trending food is acai bowls. These colorful bowls have taken over health food stores and Instagram accounts everywhere. They're marketed as superfoods, as ancient wisdom from the rainforest. But here's what they're not telling you. Many of these products come from regions where spiritual practices and nature worship are deeply embedded in the culture. The harvesting of these berries is often connected to indigenous rituals that honor forest spirits and nature deities. When you consume products that have been blessed or prayed over by people serving other gods, you're not just eating fruit. You're eating food that carries spiritual attachments. Deuteronomy 32 tells us clearly that the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons, not to God. I'm not saying the berry itself is evil. I'm saying the system behind it, the marketing around it, the spiritual energy poured into it by those who don't serve the living God, creates a problem. You're being told these foods have mystical properties, that they'll give you energy and life force. That's New Age language. That's Eastern mysticism dressed up as health food. When you buy into the belief that this food has special powers, you're putting your faith in creation instead of the Creator. You're trusting in the fruit instead of trusting in God. That's idolatry. And idolatry, according to Scripture, is as the sin of witchcraft. The enemy doesn't need you to bow to a statue. He just needs you to believe that something other than God is your source of strength. Look at how these bowls are presented. They're arranged like mandalas, those circular spiritual symbols used in Buddhism and Hinduism for meditation. The fruit is placed in specific patterns, the toppings arranged in sacred geometry. This isn't accidental. This is spiritual programming. Every time you eat from a bowl arranged like an altar, you're participating in a ritual you don't even recognize. The companies selling these products often use language about connecting with nature, honoring the earth, and receiving energy from ancient sources. That's paganism. That's earth worship. That's the same thing God judged Israel for when they bowed to Asherah poles and made offerings to the Queen of Heaven. The packaging has changed, but the spirit remains the same. The third trending food is matcha. This green powder has become the darling of the health world. Coffee shops serve it. Influencers promote it. Everyone claims it gives them focus and calm energy. But do you know where matcha comes from? Do you know its history? Matcha was originally used in Buddhist meditation ceremonies. It was consumed as part of spiritual rituals designed to enhance meditation and connect practitioners to what they called enlightenment. When you drink matcha, especially when you're participating in the trendy cafe culture around it, you're unknowingly connecting yourself to these Eastern spiritual practices. You're consuming something that was created for and used in religious ceremonies that have nothing to do with Jesus Christ. The Bible is clear in 1 Corinthians. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and the table of demons. Some of you will say, but it's just tea. It's just a drink. That's exactly what the enemy wants you to think. That's how he operates. He makes it seem harmless, innocent, trendy. But in the spiritual dimension, you're making an agreement. You're participating in a tradition that honors false peace and false enlightenment. Real peace comes from the Prince of Peace. Real enlightenment comes from the Holy Spirit, not from a powder used in meditation rituals. The preparation itself is ritualistic. The whisking in specific patterns, the specific temperature of water, the mindfulness required in the process. All of this comes from Zen Buddhist tea ceremonies, where every movement was meant to be a meditation, every sip a spiritual act. When you participate in this, even casually, you're opening yourself to the spirits behind these practices. Furthermore, matcha culture promotes a false sense of calm that comes from a substance rather than from the presence of God. It teaches you to depend on a drink for peace instead of depending on prayer. Number 4, kombucha. The fourth trending food is kombucha. This fermented tea has exploded in popularity. Health food stores can barely keep it in stock. People swear by its benefits, claiming it heals their gut and gives them energy. But let me tell you what's really in that bottle. Kombucha is made through a fermentation process using what they call a SCOBY, which stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. But in the fermentation community, they call this living organism the mother. Yes, they literally refer to it as a mother that gives birth to new batches. This language alone should make you pause. In witchcraft and pagan traditions, there's always this emphasis on the divine feminine, the mother goddess, the earth mother. When you participate in a food culture that uses this kind of language, you're connecting to something spiritual. Furthermore, fermentation itself has ancient connections to spiritual practices. Many cultures used fermented drinks in their religious ceremonies and offerings to their gods. The Babylonians, the Egyptians, cultures that God judged for their idolatry, all used fermentation as part of their worship to false deities. Now suddenly, this ancient practice is being revived and marketed to you as health and wellness. When you drink kombucha regularly, especially when you buy into the mystical health claims surrounding it, you're participating in a modern version of ancient pagan practices. You're putting your faith in the mother instead of in the father. You're trusting in fermentation instead of in the Holy Spirit's work in your life. The companies producing kombucha often promote New Age philosophies. They talk about gut health as if your digestive system is a spiritual center. They use language about balance and harmony that comes straight from Eastern religion. They're not just selling a drink. They're selling a worldview that says your body has wisdom apart from God, that you need to listen to your gut instead of listening to the spirit. Some kombucha brands openly display occult symbols on their labels. Moons, stars, mystical creatures, and symbols used in witchcraft are printed right there for you to see. They're not hiding it. They're telling you exactly what spirit is behind their product. Number 5. Plant-based meat substitutes. The 5th trending food is plant-based meat substitutes. Now before you get upset, hear me out. I'm not talking about vegetables. I'm not talking about someone choosing not to eat meat. I'm talking about the specific products that are engineered in laboratories to bleed like meat, taste like meat, and fool you into thinking it's meat when it's not. This is about deception. This is about creating something fake and calling it real. The Bible warns us that in the last days, people will abandon sound doctrine and gather teachers who tell them what their itching ears want to hear. These products are the physical manifestation of that spiritual condition. They're telling people, you can have everything you want without any sacrifice. You can have the taste without the truth. You can have the experience without the reality. But here's the deeper issue. Many of these companies are funded and promoted by people who are openly pushing agendas that oppose biblical values. They're not just selling food. They're selling a philosophy, a worldview that says humanity can improve on God's design, that we can create something better than what the Creator made. That's the spirit of Babel. That's the spirit that says, we don't need God. We can build our own tower to heaven. When you consume these products while celebrating the ideology behind them, you're agreeing with a system that rejects God's original design. Genesis tells us that God created animals for food. He gave them to us after the flood. Jesus himself ate fish. But now we have a movement saying God got it wrong, that we need to go beyond his plan. That's not wisdom. That's rebellion. And let me go deeper. Some of these products contain ingredients that are developed using processes that raise serious ethical questions. Some use technology that manipulates cellular structure in ways that cross boundaries God never intended us to cross. When you eat these products, you're participating in a scientific experiment, not a meal. You're consuming something that came from a laboratory, not from the earth God created. The marketing behind these products uses language of saving the planet, as if creation needs saving from God's design. This is environmental idolatry. This is worshipping the creation rather than the Creator. Romans chapter 1 warns about those who exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped created things rather than the Creator. That's exactly what's happening when people elevate concern for animals above God's ordained purpose for them. These companies often partner with organizations promoting agendas that directly contradict Scripture. The money you spend on these products funds causes that oppose biblical marriage, biblical family structure, and biblical morality. You think you're just buying a burger substitute, but your purchase is financing spiritual warfare against the kingdom of God. I can already hear some of you thinking, this is too much. You're making food into something it's not. But that's where you're wrong. I'm not making food into anything. God already established that food is spiritual. He's the one who gave dietary laws to Israel. He's the one who used food to teach them about holiness and separation. He's the one who said certain foods were clean and others unclean. not because of nutrition, but because of what they represented spiritually. Food has always been about more than the physical. It's about what you're agreeing with, what you're partnering with, what you're allowing to influence you. The Israelites got in trouble not just for worshipping idols, but for eating the food sacrificed to those idols. Why? Because eating is participation. Eating is covenant. Eating is agreement. So when you consume trending foods without discerning the spirits behind them, without understanding the culture and ideology they represent, you're opening spiritual doors. You're making agreements you don't even know you're making. You're participating in rituals disguised as meals. Some of you reading this have been wondering why your prayer life feels dry, why breakthrough keeps getting delayed, why you feel spiritually heavy even though you're going to church and reading your Bible. Check your kitchen, check your pantry, check what you've been consuming, not just physically, but spiritually. What cultures are you celebrating through your food choices? What ideologies are you supporting with your purchases? The Bible tells us that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. You were bought with a price. You don't belong to yourself. You belong to God. And if your body is His temple, then you need to guard what enters it. Not just for health reasons, but for spiritual reasons. What you eat affects your spirit. What you consume influences your consciousness. This is why fasting is so powerful. When you fast, you're not just abstaining from food. You're breaking agreements. You're severing connections. You're saying no to the physical so you can say yes to the spiritual. You're reminding your flesh that it doesn't rule you. I'm not telling you to become paranoid about every meal. I'm telling you to become prayerful. I'm telling you to develop discernment. Stop mindlessly following trends and start spiritually evaluating everything. Ask the Holy Spirit, should I eat this? Is there something wrong with this? What spirit is behind this food culture? And when God shows you something, obey Him immediately. Your destiny is too important to be contaminated by careless eating. Your calling is too valuable to be delayed by spiritual ignorance. You were created for dominion, not for bondage. Every time you choose to discern before you eat, every time you pray over your food, every time you reject what the culture celebrates but God condemns, you're walking in authority. The enemy thought he could use food to trap you. He thought he could use trends to deceive you. But today, you're waking up. Today, you're seeing clearly. From this moment forward, you will not eat casually. You will ask questions. You will seek God. You will pray over your food not as a religious ritual, but as a spiritual weapon. Father, in the name of Jesus, I pray for every person reading this right now. Open their eyes to see what they've been blind to. Give them spiritual discernment about the food they eat and the trends they follow. Break every spiritual contract they've unknowingly made through food. Cancel every agreement established through eating. Let the blood of Jesus cleanse their bodies and purify their temples. Give them the strength to say no to their cravings and yes to your will. We declare that our bodies belong to you. Our temples are holy, and no weapon formed against us through food shall prosper. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
3. The Funeral of a Great Myth. This essay was first published in Christian Reflections, 1998, and develops one of the myths in Is Theology Poetry? There are some mistakes which humanity has made and repented so often that there is now really no excuse for making them again. One of these is the injustice which every age does to its predecessor. For example, the ignorant contempt which the humanists, even good humanists like Sir Thomas More, felt for medieval philosophy, or romantics, even good romantics like Keats, felt for 18th century poetry. Each time all this reaction and resentment has to be punished and unsaid. It is a wasteful performance. It is tempting to try whether we, at least, cannot avoid it. Why should we not give our predecessors a fair and filial dismissal? Such, at all events, is the attempt I am going to make in this paper. I come to bury the great myth of the 19th and early 20th century, but also to praise it. I am going to pronounce a funeral oration. By this great myth, I mean that picture of reality which resulted during the period under consideration, not logically but imaginatively, from some of the more striking and, so to speak, marketable theories of the real scientists. I have heard this myth called Wellsianity. The name is a good one insofar as it does justice to the share which a great imaginative writer bore in building it up. But it is not satisfactory. It suggests, as we shall see, an error about the date at which the myth became dominant, and it also suggests that the myth affected only the middle-brow mind. In fact, it is as much behind Bridges' Testament of Beauty as it is behind the work of Wells. It dominates minds as different as those of Professor Alexander and Walt Disney. It is implicit in nearly every modern article on politics, sociology, and ethics. I call it a myth because it is, as I have said, the imaginative and not the logical result of what is vaguely called modern science. Strictly speaking, there is, I confess, no such thing as modern science. There are only particular sciences, all in a state of rapid change and sometimes inconsistent with one another. What the myth uses is a selection from the scientific theories, a selection made at first and modified afterwards in obedience to imaginative and emotional needs. It is the work of the folk imagination, moved by its natural appetite for an impressive unity. It therefore treats its data with great freedom, selecting, slurring, expurgating, and adding at will. The central idea of the myth is what its believers would call evolution, or development, or emergence, just as the central idea in the myth of Adonis is death and rebirth. I do not mean that the doctrine of evolution, as held by practicing biologists, is a myth. It may be shown by later biologists to be a less satisfactory hypothesis than was hoped 50 years ago, but that does not amount to being a myth. It is a genuine scientific hypothesis. But we must sharply distinguish between evolution as a biological theorem and popular evolutionism or developmentalism, which is certainly a myth. Before proceeding to describe it and, which is my chief business, to pronounce its eulogy, I had better make clear its mythical character. We have, first of all, the evidence of chronology. If popular evolutionism were, as it imagines itself to be, not a myth, but the intellectually legitimate result of the scientific theorem on the public mind, it would arise after that theorem had become widely known. We should have the theorem known first of all to a few, then adopted by all the scientists, then spreading to all men of general education, then beginning to affect poetry and the arts, and so finally percolating to the mass of the people. In fact, however, we find something quite different. The clearest and finest poetical expressions of the myth come before The Origin of Species was published, 1859, and long before it had established itself as scientific orthodoxy. There had, to be sure, been hints and germs of the theory in scientific circles before 1859. But if the mythopoeic poets were at all infected by those germs, they must have been very up-to-date indeed, very predisposed to catch the infection. Almost before the scientists spoke, certainly before they spoke clearly, imagination was ripe for it. The finest expression of the myth in English does not come from Bridges, nor from Shaw, nor from Wells, nor from Olaf Stapledon. It is this: As heaven and earth are fairer, fairer far than chaos and blank darkness, though once chiefs, and as we show beyond that heaven and earth, in form and shape compact and beautiful, in will, in action free, companionship, and thousand other signs of purer life, so on our heels a fresh perfection treads, a power more strong in beauty born of us, and fated to excel us, as we pass in glory that old darkness. Thus Oceanus, in Keats's Hyperion, nearly 40 years before The Origin of Species. And on the continent we have the Nibelung's Ring. Coming, as I do, to bury but also to praise the receding age, I will by no means join in the modern depreciation of Wagner. He may, for all I know, have been a bad man. He may, though I shall never believe it, have been a bad musician. But as a mythopoeic poet he is incomparable. The tragedy of the evolutionary myth has never been more nobly expressed than in his Wotan. its heady raptures never more irresistibly than in Siegfried. That he himself knew quite well what he was writing about can be seen from his letter to August Rockel in 1854. The progress of the whole drama shows the necessity of recognizing and submitting to the change, the diversity, the multiplicity, the eternal novelty of the real. Wotan rises to the tragic height of willing his own downfall. This is all we have to learn from the history of man, to will the necessary and ourselves to bring it to pass. If Shaw's Back to Methuselah were really, as he supposed, the work of a prophet or a pioneer ushering in the reign of a new myth, its predominantly comic tone and its generally low emotional temperature would be inexplicable. It is admirable fun, but not thus are new epochs brought to birth. The ease with which he plays with the myth shows that the myth is fully digested and already senile. Shaw is the Lucian or the Snorri of this mythology. To find its Aeschylus or its Elder Edda, you must go back to Keats and Wagner. That, then, is the first proof that popular evolution is a myth. In making it, imagination runs ahead of scientific evidence. The prophetic soul of the big world was already pregnant with the myth. If science had not met the imaginative need, science would not have been so popular. But probably every age gets, within certain limits, the science it desires. In the second place, we have internal evidence. Popular evolutionism, or developmentalism, differs in content from the evolution of the real biologists. To the biologist, evolution is a hypothesis. It covers more of the facts than any other hypothesis at present on the market, and is therefore to be accepted unless or until some new supposal can be shown to cover still more facts with even fewer assumptions. At least, that is what I think most biologists would say. Professor D.M.S. Watson, it is true, would not go so far. According to him, evolution is accepted by zoologists not because it has been observed to occur or can be proved by logically coherent evidence to be true, but because the only alternative, special creation, is clearly incredible. This would mean that the sole ground for believing it is not empirical, but metaphysical. The dogma of an amateur metaphysician who finds special creation incredible. But I do not think it has really come to that. Most biologists have a more robust belief in evolution than Professor Watson. But it is certainly a hypothesis. In the myth, however, there is nothing hypothetical about it. It is basic fact. Or, to speak more strictly, such distinctions do not exist on the mythical level at all. There are more important differences to follow. In the science, evolution is a theory about changes. In the myth, it is a fact about improvements. Thus a real scientist, like Professor J.B.S. Haldane, is at pains to point out that popular ideas of evolution lay a wholly unjustified emphasis on those changes which have rendered creatures, by human standards, better or more interesting. He adds, "We are therefore inclined to regard progress as the rule in evolution. Actually, it is the exception, and for every case of it there are 10 of degeneration." But the myth simply expurgates the 10 cases of degeneration. In the popular mind, the word evolution conjures up a picture of things moving onwards and upwards, and of nothing else whatsoever. And it might have been predicted that it would do so. Already, before science had spoken, the mythical imagination knew the kind of evolution it wanted. It wanted the Keatsian and Wagnerian kind, the gods superseding the Titans, and the young, joyous, careless, amorous Siegfried superseding the careworn, anxious, treaty-entangled Wotan. If science offers any instances to satisfy that demand, they will be eagerly accepted. If it offers any instances that frustrate it, they will simply be ignored. Again, for the scientist, evolution is a purely biological theorem. It takes over organic life on this planet as a going concern, and tries to explain certain changes within that field. It makes no cosmic statements, no metaphysical statements, no eschatological statements. Granted that we now have minds we can trust, granted that organic life came to exist, it tries to explain, say, how a species that once had wings came to lose them. It explains this by the negative effect of environment operating on small variations. It does not, in itself, explain the origin of organic life. nor of the variations, nor does it discuss the origin and validity of reason. It may well tell you how the brain, through which reason now operates, arose, but that is a different matter. Still less does it even attempt to tell you how the universe as a whole arose, or what it is, or whither it is tending. But the myth knows nothing of these reticences. Having turned what was a theory of change into a theory of improvement, it then makes this a cosmic theory. Not merely terrestrial organisms, but everything is moving upwards and onwards. A reason has evolved out of instinct, virtue out of complexes, poetry out of erotic howls and grunts, civilization out of savagery, the organic out of inorganic, the solar system out of some sidereal soup or traffic block. And conversely, reason, virtue, art, and civilization as we now know them are only the crude or embryonic beginnings of far better things, perhaps deity itself, in the remote future. For in the myth, evolution, as the myth understands it, is the formula of all existence. To exist means to be moving from the status of almost zero to the status of almost infinity. To those brought up on the myth, nothing seems more normal, more natural, more plausible than that chaos should turn into order, death into life, ignorance into knowledge. And with this we reach the full-blown myth. It is one of the most moving and satisfying world dramas which have ever been imagined. The drama proper is preceded, do not forget the Rheingold here, by the most austere of all preludes, the infinite void and matter endlessly, aimlessly moving to bring forth it knows not what. Then by some millionth chance, what tragic irony, the conditions at one point of space and time bubble up into that tiny fermentation which we call organic life. At first, everything seems to be against the infant hero of our drama, just as everything always was against the seventh son or ill-used stepdaughter in a fairy tale. But life somehow wins through. With incalculable sufferings, the sorrows of the Volsungs were nothing to it. Against all but insuperable obstacles, it spreads, it breeds, it complicates itself. From the amoeba up to the reptile, up to the mammal. Life, here comes our first climax, wantons as in her prime. This is the age of monsters. Dragons prowl the earth, devour one another and die. Then the old irresistible theme of the younger son or the ugly duckling is repeated. As the weak, tiny spark of life herself began amidst the beasts that are far larger and stronger than he, there comes forth a little, naked, shivering, cowering biped, shuffling, not yet fully erect, promising nothing, the product of another millionth chance. His name in this myth is Man. Elsewhere he has been the young Beowulf, whom men at first thought a dastard, or the stripling David, armed only with a sling against mail-clad Goliath, or Jack the Giant Killer himself, or even Hop o' My Thumb. He thrives. He begins killing his giants. He becomes the caveman with his flints and his club, muttering and growling over his enemy's bones, almost a brute, yet somehow able to invent art, pottery, language, weapons, cookery, and nearly everything else. His name in another story is Robinson Crusoe, dragging his screaming mate by her hair, I do not exactly know why, tearing his children to pieces in fierce jealousy until they are old enough to tear him, and cowering before the terrible gods whom he has invented in his own image. But these were only growing pains. In the next act he becomes the true man. He learns to master nature. Science arises and dissipates the superstitions of his infancy. More and more he becomes the controller of his own fate. Passing hastily over the historical period, in it the upward and onward movement gets in places a little indistinct, but it is a mere nothing by the time scale we are using. We follow our hero on into the future. See him in the last act, though not the last scene, of this great mystery. A race of demigods now rule the planet, in some versions the galaxy. Eugenics have made certain that only demigods will now be born. Psychoanalysis, that none of them shall lose or smirch his divinity. Economics, that they shall have to hand all that demigods require. Man has ascended his throne. Man has become God. All is a blaze of glory. And now, mark well the final stroke of mythopoeic genius. It is only the more debased versions of the myth that end here. For to end here is a little pathetic, even a little vulgar. If we stopped at this point, the story would lack the highest grandeur. Therefore, in the best versions, the last scene reverses all. Arthur died. Siegfried died. Roland died at Roncevaux. Dusk steals darkly over the gods. All this time we have forgotten Mordred, Hagen, Ganelon. All this time nature, the old enemy who only seemed to be defeated, has been gnawing away, silently, unceasingly, out of the reach of human power. The sun will cool. All suns will cool. The whole universe will run down. A life, every form of life, will be banished without hope of return from every cubic inch of infinite space. All ends in nothingness. Universal darkness covers all. True to the shape of Elizabethan tragedy, the hero has swiftly fallen from the glory to which he slowly climbed. We are dismissed in calm of mind, all passion spent. It is indeed much better than an Elizabethan tragedy, for it has a more complete finality. It brings us to the end not of a story, but of all possible stories. Enden sah ich die Welt. I grew up believing in this myth, and I have felt, I still feel, its almost perfect grandeur. Let no one say we are an unimaginative age. Neither the Greeks nor the Norsemen ever invented a better story. Even to the present day, in certain moods, I could almost find it in my heart to wish that it was not mythical but true. And yet, how could it be? What makes it impossible that it should be true is not so much the lack of evidence for this or that scene in the drama as the fatal self-contradiction which runs right through it. The myth cannot even get going without accepting a good deal from the real sciences. And the real sciences cannot be accepted for a moment unless rational inferences are valid. For every science claims to be a series of inferences from observed facts. It is only by such inferences that you can reach your nebulae and protoplasm and dinosaurs and submen and cavemen at all. Unless you start by believing that reality in the remotest space and the remotest time rigidly obeys the laws of logic, you can have no ground for believing in any astronomy, any biology, any paleontology, any archaeology. To reach the positions held by the real scientists, which are then taken over by the myth, you must, in fact, treat reason as an absolute. But at the same time, the myth asks me to believe that reason is simply the unforeseen and unintended byproduct of a mindless process at one stage of its endless and aimless becoming. The content of the myth thus knocks from under me the only ground on which I could possibly believe the myth to be true. If my own mind is a product of the irrational, if what seem my clearest reasonings are only the way in which a creature conditioned as I am is bound to feel, how shall I trust my mind when it tells me about evolution? They say, in effect, I will prove that what you call a proof is only the result of mental habits, which result from heredity, which results from biochemistry, which results from physics. But this is the same as saying, I will prove that proofs are irrational. More succinctly, I will prove that there are no proofs. The fact that some people of scientific education cannot by any effort be taught to see the difficulty confirms one's suspicion that here we touch a radical disease in their whole style of thought. But the man who does see it is compelled to reject as mythical the cosmology in which most of us were brought up. That it has embedded in it many true particulars I do not doubt, but in its entirety it simply will not do. Whatever the real universe may turn out to be like, it can't be like that. I have been speaking hitherto of this myth as of a thing to be buried, because I believe that its dominance is already over, in the sense that what seem to me to be the most vigorous movements of contemporary thought point away from it. Physics, a discipline less easily mythological, is replacing biology as the science par excellence in the mind of the plain man. The whole philosophy of becoming has been vigorously challenged by the American humanists. The revival of theology has attained proportions that have to be reckoned with. The romantic poetry and music in which popular evolutionism found its natural counterpart are going out of fashion. But of course, a myth does not die in a day. We may expect that this myth, when driven from cultured circles, will long retain its hold on the masses, and even when abandoned by them, will continue for centuries to haunt our language. Those who wish to attack it must beware of despising it. There are deep reasons for its popularity. The basic idea of the myth, that small or chaotic or feeble things perpetually turn themselves into large, strong, ordered things, may at first sight seem a very odd one. We have never actually seen a pile of rubble turning itself into a house. But this odd idea commends itself to the imagination by the help of what seem to be two instances of it within everyone's knowledge. Everyone has seen individual organisms doing it. Acorns become oaks, grubs become insects, eggs become birds. Every man was once an embryo. And secondly, which weighs very much in the popular mind during a machine age, everyone has seen evolution really happening in the history of machines. We all remember when locomotives were smaller and less efficient than they are now. These two apparent instances are quite enough to convince the imagination that evolution, in a cosmic sense, is the most natural thing in the world. It is true that reason cannot here agree with imagination. These apparent instances are not really instances of evolution at all. The oak comes indeed from the acorn, but then the acorn was dropped by an earlier oak. Every man began with the union of an ovum and a spermatozoon, but the ovum and the spermatozoon came from two fully developed human beings. The modern express engine came from the rocket, but the rocket came not from something under and more elementary than itself, but from something much more developed and highly organized, the mind of a man, and a man of genius. Modern art may have developed from savage art, but then the very first picture of all did not evolve itself. It came from something overwhelmingly greater than itself, from the mind of that man who, by seeing for the first time that marks on a flat surface could be made to look like animals and men, proved himself to excel in sheer blinding genius any of the artists who have succeeded him. It may be true that if we trace back any existing civilization to its beginnings, we shall find those beginnings crude and savage. But then, when you look closer, you usually find that these beginnings themselves come from a wreck of some earlier civilization. In other words, the apparent instances of, or analogies to, evolution which impress the folk imagination operate by fixing our attention on one half of the process. What we actually see all round us is a double process, the perfect dropping an imperfect seed, which in its turn develops to perfection. By concentrating exclusively on the record of upward movement in this cycle, we seem to see evolution. I am not in the least denying that organisms on this planet may have evolved. But if we are to be guided by the analogy of nature as we now know her, it would be reasonable to suppose that this evolutionary process was the second half of a long pattern, that the crude beginnings of life on this planet have themselves been dropped there by a full and perfect life. The analogy may be mistaken. Perhaps nature was once different. Perhaps the universe as a whole is quite different from those parts of it which fall under our observation. But if that is so, if there was once a dead universe which somehow made itself alive, if there was absolutely original savagery which raised itself by its own shoulder-strap into civilization, then we ought to recognize that things of this sort happen no longer, that the world we are being asked to believe in is radically unlike the world we experience. In other words, all the immediate plausibility of the myth has vanished. But it has vanished only because we have been thinking it will remain plausible to the imagination, and it is imagination which makes the myth. It takes over from rational thought only what it finds convenient. Another source of strength in the myth is what the psychologists would call its ambivalence. It gratifies equally two opposite tendencies of the mind, the tendency to denigration and the tendency to flattery. In the myth, everything is becoming everything else. In fact, everything is everything else at an earlier or later stage of development, the later stages being always the better. This means that if you are feeling like Mencken, you can debunk all the respectable things by pointing out that they are merely elaborations of the disreputable things. Love is merely an elaboration of lust, virtue merely an elaboration of instinct, and so forth. On the one hand, it also means that if you are feeling what the people call idealistic, you can regard all the nasty things in yourself or your party or your nation as being merely the undeveloped forms of all the nice things. Vice is only undeveloped virtue, egotism only undeveloped altruism. A little more education will set everything right. The myth also soothes the old wounds of our childhood. Without going as far as Freud, we may yet well admit that every man has an old grudge against his father and his first teacher. The process of being brought up, however well it is done, cannot fail to offend. How pleasing, therefore, to abandon the old idea of descent from our concoctors in favour of the new idea of evolution or emergence, to feel that we have risen from them as a flower from the earth, that we transcend them as Keats's gods transcended the Titans. One then gets a kind of cosmic excuse for regarding one's father as a muddling old mimer, and his claims upon our gratitude or respect as an insufferable Stammenlied. Out of the way, old fool. It is we who know how to forge Nothung. The myth also pleases those who want to sell things to us. In the old days, a man had a family carriage built for him when he got married and expected it to last all his life. Such a frame of mind would hardly suit modern manufacturers, but popular evolutionism suits them exactly. Nothing ought to last. They want you to have a new car, a new radio set, a new everything every year. The new model must always be superseding the old. Madame would like the latest fashion. For this is evolution, this is development, this is the way the universe itself is going. And sales resistance is the sin against the Holy Ghost, the élan vital. Finally, modern politics would be impossible without the myth. It arose in the revolutionary period, but for the political ideals of that period it would never have been accepted. That explains why the myth concentrates on Haldane's one case of biological progress and ignores his 10 cases of degeneration. If the cases of degeneration were kept in mind, it would be impossible not to see that any given change in society is at least as likely to destroy the liberties and amenities we already have as to add new ones, that the danger of slipping back is at least as great as the chance of getting on, that a prudent society must spend at least as much energy on conserving what it has as on improvement. A clear knowledge of these truisms would be fatal both to the political left and to the political right of modern times. The myth obscures that knowledge. Great parties have a vested interest in maintaining the myth. We must therefore expect that it will survive in the popular press, including the ostensibly comic press, long after it has been expelled from educated circles. In Russia, where it has been built into the state religion, it may survive for centuries. For it has great allies. Its friends are propaganda, party cries, and bilge, and man's incorrigible mind. But that is not the note on which I would wish to end. The myth has all these discreditable allies, but we should be far astray if we thought it had no others. As I have tried to show, it has better allies too. It appeals to the same innocent and permanent needs in us which welcome Jack the Giant Killer. It gives us almost everything the imagination craves: irony, heroism, vastness, unity and multiplicity, and a tragic close. It appeals to every part of me except my reason. That is why those of us who feel that the myth is already dead for us must not make the mistake of trying to debunk it in the wrong way. We must not fancy that we are securing the modern world from something grim and dry, something that starves the soul. The contrary is the truth. It is our painful duty to wake the world from an enchantment. The real universe is probably in many respects less poetical, certainly less tidy and unified than they had supposed. Man's role in it is less heroic. The danger that really hangs over him is perhaps entirely lacking in true tragic dignity. It is only in the last resort, and after all lesser poetries have been renounced and imagination sternly subjected to intellect, that we shall be able to offer them any compensation for what we intend to take away from them. That is why, in the meantime, we must treat the myth with respect. It was all, on a certain level, nonsense. But a man would be a dull dog if he could not feel the thrill and charm of it. For my own part, though I believe it no longer, I shall always enjoy it, as I enjoy other myths. I shall keep my caveman where I keep Balder and Helen and the Argonauts, and there often revisit him.